another question on the stress test, if I may. Why is it that, I understand politically why they're happening, and it remains to be seen how cleansing they really are in terms of flushing out nasties and whiz-bangs on bank balance sheets. But why isn't it the case that investors like us can't just look at bank balance sheets? Why is it so opaque? Why do we need to send Oliver Wyman in to have a look, and then for the regulator to filter through the message of what's happening within a bank? Surely it can't be beyond the wit of investors, particularly extremely sophisticated investors like you, who obviously have massive knowledge in this area, to look at bank balance sheets for yourselves and decide.
Actually, you can, but it's just a lot of work. Let me take an example. You want to know what's the quality of the balance sheet of HSH Nordbank, for example. First of all, you have to read the reports. They are in German. Okay, that's not a good start, at least for me. Then you have to read the Pillar 3 report, which is a report which is made under a set of regulatory rules, very specific ones. Then you have to read the annual report, which is under IFRS. And then you have to read the German GAAP report. Okay? And of course, the three rules are not consistent. So it's extremely complex to understand exactly what's going on. I mean, you can spend days trying to understand what's the equity of that bank. You know, that should be the simplest number to find. You know, you should, okay, it's 2 billion, 5 billion. It should be very simple. But changing simply from one system to another, you can change the equity, you know, by a margin of 50%, 50, you know, enormous difference, because it's very complex. Actually, banks publish a lot of information, but it's very hard to understand what it means. You know, they publish, for example, a detail of each portfolio with the ratings of each items in a portfolio. So, I mean, you've got a lot of information, but it's very difficult to actually use it.
But surely it leads to malinvestment in one of our most important commercial sectors. I mean, just looking down at the third column from the right there, it's not unusual for banks to have share price, you know, price to books that are 1 or even less, which suggests that investors believe the balance sheets that they're in the public domain are not everything that needs to be known about the bank.
Or
and
that
surely, you know, the joint stock law going back for centuries is, you know, if you don't disclose everything about your business and you have publicly traded equity, you're trading under false pretenses, which is a criminal offence.
But the thing is that everything is disclosed. But the problem is that we've had change in the regulation, in accounting rules, which, as a consequence, makes a balance sheet
so difficult to interpret.
Very difficult to read because, you know, I mean, in 2000, if you look at a German bank, you were in German GAAP. Easy. Regulation was local, although we had already above the agreement, okay? But everything was quite simple because it was in German GAAP, okay? Then you've had first DIS, okay, which introduced very important changes in the way you see equity, in the way you see liabilities, even in the way you compute certain assets, okay? Then you've had the implementation of Basel II, okay? And the funny thing is that the way regulation is implemented is not one for all. You have steps, okay? So you have floors under which you still compute the assets under Basel I, okay? And then at certain dates, you will switch step by step under Basel II, okay? So it's really difficult because we are living in an environment that since 2000 has changed accounting standards, regulations, every 3 to 5 years. So that's why it's so difficult to understand.
But we're all grown-ups, though. I mean, why do we have to be spoon-fed information about the health of what are, you know, some of the biggest companies in the world? Why can't we differ in our interpretations? Yes. But then that's a necessary price search phenomenon.
That's a very good question, but you've got two things in what the ECB is going to do. You've got the asset quality review, which is more in line with what you're saying, is really I mean, have you been telling us lies, basically, or what's exactly in your balance sheet? But here, again, you've got disclosure, but with regulations that are so different from one country to another, that actually it's a disclosure that is very difficult to really understand. Let me take an example. You look at the balance sheet of Banco Popular. You find non-performing loans, X billions, of which performing loans. Okay, it's a bit odd, but it's the way it's the way it's defined in Spain. Of which watch list performing loans. Okay, and then so you put this in your Excel sheet, and then you look at the Italian bank, and you find watch list loans. So you say, okay, it's like in Spain, so it should be a performing loan, but which is not that good. Exactly. Actually, it's exactly the opposite. It's basically the worst category in Italy. So you're completely lost. I mean, extremely difficult to understand. So what the ECB is going to do, and this is very important, is stop all this, make clear definition for all Europe of non-performing loans, and force banks to disclose with the same standards. And this is something that has never been done. And the second one is the stress test. And stress test, no one can do it, actually. This is something on which you can't have any disclosure and you can't really do your homework. The only thing you can do, and what we do, is replicate previous stress tests to try and guess what's going to happen. But you can't come up with the macro assumptions that whatever steering committee is going to use, whatever econometric regressions they are going to produce on the balance sheet. This is something you cannot guess in advance. You can only use previous stress tests and try to make comparisons.
Okay, before we move on to questions, I want to ask you guys, to what extent your general view that we are going to muddle through, we're not going to have another banking sector spectacular in Europe, at least in the foreseeable future. To what extent that assumption relies on big time ECB QE? Rather than the kind of covert QE they've been doing. I mean, ECB's doubled its balance sheet, right, since 2009. So it's not like there hasn't been QE. I know they tell the German voters that we haven't had QE, but we have had QE in the Eurozone.
Different kind, yeah.
Bank of England has almost quadrupled its balance sheet, of course. The Fed's tripled its balance sheet, and the ECB's basically doubled its balance sheet. And this is actually interesting. These guys fascinating on this subject. Just tell us a little bit about Target 2. I know if anybody wants to really deeply understand Target 2, they can read the work of Professor Hans Zinn, which is very controversial, but also quite enlightening in my view. Just describe, either or both of you, what's going on in this graph and how it relates to Eurozone QE.
Target 2 is very important because it gives you information on key issues in the Eurozone and on very different aspects. The first one is what exactly is Target 2? You have to know what it is. It's the system that is making and clearing every single payment in the Eurozone. Okay, every single payment, except cash, of course, goes through Target 2. So first of all,
it's like a pan-Eurozone clearinghouse.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
So the first thing is you see capital flows in the Eurozone. Because basically when a Greek guy buys a German car, he takes the money from his Greek bank. The Greek bank sends money to the German bank. The Greek bank is needing money, so they borrow from the Greek central bank. The Greek central bank needs money, asks it from the German central bank, who gets the money from the German bank. Okay, so, no, it's the way it works. So basically, you see capital issues, the capital flows in the Eurozone when there is a problem in terms of equilibrium. The second thing is it's a
because the interbank market is basically still not working properly, so we're having to use Target 2 as a kind of surrogate.
Yeah, because basically it's because the Greek banks can only fund themselves at the Greek central bank. Because of course, if they found money somewhere else, for example from German investors, they wouldn't need to use the Greek central bank. So Target 2 is really between central banks only.
And it's only evolved. Sorry, just amazingly important subject. This massive spasm in Target 2 has only happened, of course, since 2008 as a way of kind of patching the system so it works for a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because basically Greek banks, Italian banks could not fund themselves outside of central banks. So it's really the equilibrium issue of the Eurozone. But it's also the reason why we are all in the same boat, and we can't jump overnight, because basically a target 2 balances are claims. Legally, there are claims. So what you can see here is basically the claim of Germany on the periphery, and it's hundreds of billions. It's much more than the MES, it's much more than EFSF, it's much more than anything.
All equity raised by Eurozone banks, we learned.
Yeah, it's much more than pretty much anything in the Eurozone. So it's really the risk that the German central bank is having on the other central banks. So, it's difficult to jump out of the boat when you're lending 800 billion euros to someone. But it's also a way to see how systemic risk has been decreasing. Because one of the key elements of the banking union is the pan-European deposit guarantee. Okay? It's not done yet, it's only the final stage of the union, but people already understand that it's something that is going to happen. And it's basically saying to a guy in Portugal, in Greece, in Slovenia, wherever, that if he's putting money at the bank, he's going to get it back in euros. He's not going to get it back in drachmas, he's not going to get it back in whatever currency, he's going to get it back in euros. So it's the reason why people are putting money at their banks again, and the target 2 balances are reducing. So it's really the best way to see what's going on currently in terms of systemic risk in the Eurozone. It's the best indicator.
So this works as a kind of proto-lubrication, a proto-QE. Do you think we'll see explicit QE from Mr. Draghi?
Well, it depends what we call QE, because technically speaking, we're still in an environment where rates are low, and when you look at the way the European Central Bank works and the way the Eurozone system works, you can have a permanent QE. What I mean is that in the Eurozone, banks can fund themselves without any limitation at the central bank. With 2 ways. Of course, they can put some assets on a repo basis at the central bank. But even if they run out of assets, they can rely on the emergency facility, which was the case, for example, for Greek banks. All over the crisis, they've been funded directly by the ECB.
Sure.
So it's very difficult to assess or to compare what has been done in the US in terms of QE, for example, and what is at stake in Europe. What is sure is that what we can sketch as a QE is probably the LTRO of Draghi, and what we see today is that steadily but step by step, banks are repaying the LTRO. So we are getting step by step out of, I would say, an extraordinary system.